Okay, I think this is on. Sorry, everybody. I thought it was 9:30 because I saw 9:30 at the other day. I didn't realize we had moved the times around. So, hi. I'm Phoenix Perry. So, I am going to do two things today, depending on time. I think I have an hour. Shout if I don't. Okay, we'll go with that. And if any point you guys get bored or want to leave, totally okay. Okay, so this is this creative bit on top of the talk that I had planned to give. So we'll see how much of the talk I plan to give I get through. But I've been walking around here and I've been looking at all the games, and like a lot of thoughts kind of congealed in my head. And I thought, if I'm talking to the students, I want to give you all something that you can hold on to and take forward with, you know, some of you are leaving, like the rest of your lives. So this talk is geared towards you, and it's a little bit out there and a little bit strange, but I hope you bear with me. It's not as weird as it was gonna be, because I came 15 minutes late, so you're lucky. So this is things I think about when I'm skating. So these are my skates. They're pretty tricked out. This is a brand new pair, and you'll see the wheels are all beat to hell, but the skates look beautiful, because I just got them 2 weeks ago. And for me, I've really discovered this joy of play during the pandemic. And I don't know if anybody else here did this, but did anybody else here basically play their way through the whole pandemic? I did. Yeah, just played my way through the whole pandemic. And who else here now suddenly going back to their real life is like, no. Yeah, no. No, I don't want to do it. I'm like way happier on roller skates, right? So it's really paused me to think, because we're games creators, right? We make play. How is it that somehow what we make isn't necessarily that anymore? How did this happen? How did we get turned about, right? And what are we making? So I just kind of want to stop and say, are you okay? Because like, I'm not. I can't focus anymore. I have the attention of a bat that's like hearing tons of noises at once. And, you know, if you kind of ask, all the images from this talk have been generated with VQGAN, and it is trained on a data set from Google. So what you're going to see is kind of the subconscious of the interwebs, with me asking it poetry-like text prompts. So this prompt is the state of the world today, and it gave me this. And I was like, wow. First of all, what is the visual ontology? What is the thing, if we're going to list some things that we're seeing here, you know, we're seeing like just not good things. First of all, it's all men, which feels right to me. Second of all, it's like all these flags and nothing's resolving. And I think that that's very accurate for where we're sitting. So I've come to this kind of realization from skating that capitalism in games is a core rot. It isn't something that is in play naturally, right? You don't watch squirrels or ravens playing and negotiating capitalist beliefs, right? But we've woven all these grind loops into what we're doing. This vision of capitalism has a future, right? It has an end game. And I want you guys to think about that. And you know, we're in this kind of death stage world, and that rot is going to bring forward this future that has no place for humanity. It's not a place that any child today wants to live in. So look, if you ask this GAN the future, you get these images. There are no plants, right? There's no greenery, there are no animals. It's just a desert with a city in the middle of it. And I don't know about you all, but this is not a place I want to live. I want to live somewhere with plants and animals, and I want the future to be better than what it is today, not worse. And I want you all to ask, who benefits from this? Who wins, right? It's not us, definitely not us, okay? That's a robot world. And you know, who is benefiting from that? And ask yourself why all of a sudden Elon Musk wants to plug us all into the matrix, right? How does he make money off that? So if you start thinking about it, is it capitalism? Is it just capitalism? No, it's not just capitalism. It's most forms of government that have a kind of settler colonial mindset that seek to dominate life on this planet. So it's going to ruin us, and it's kind of in this like death like march, I feel like, straight to the end. And are there other ways that we could organize economy? Are there better ways we could organize the economies and the systems in our games? I think yes. I think if we look at indigenous traditions and we look at non-Western traditions, we can find many examples of societies working in ways that are productive and that give us life. This is the potlatch. This is a Pacific Northwest, and it kind of extends up into Canada and the Arctic, tradition of gift giving in indigenous cultures in the Americas. And this is a very specific tradition. It's not just like you rock up and go, here's a gift. It actually comes from this idea of surplus and like community building. So if you give your neighbors a gift, the idea is that they'll gift you back in return when they have surplus. And you create this economy that's traveling, right? And the idea is not to hold on to your gifts. If you get a gift, it's to re-gift it. So what you create here is this traveling, circular arrangement of the distribution of wealth in any community. Super different than what we're doing today, right? With grabbing money and hoarding it and putting it in the bank. This is such a revolutionarily different way than settler colonialism, which sees human beings as value to be extracted out of. It's illegal in the US and Canada, which I think is really crazy. They made this against the law. And I think that's very telling of the power of gift. So if we can kind of shift to a gift-giving paradigm, what are the radically different worldviews that could make a better future? So how do you gift in play? And what responsibility could we ask our players to have when they get given a gift through the game? So this brings me to another issue, and I think in games we have a lot of science fiction stuff. And almost without fail, I've never played one. If you have one to recommend to me, I know there are board games kind of like this, and there's solar punk stuff that kind of starts to hit on this. But most large games are colonizing games, right? They're space colonizing games. You're going out into space and you're colonizing. And No Man's Sky is a really good example of this. All you do is run around and extract value and, log the native wildlife. There's some more story now, but you get the idea. And if we're the creators of play, we're telling the story of our culture. We're crafting and creating the beliefs of the future. And we can't start colonizing other worlds until we fix our own problems. We can't extend our settler colonial mindset outwards into the solar system. That's not going to work. We're going to just kill ourselves. So I think this book is really amazing. I had the name of the writer. I was going to slot it in here. I had a text message this morning because I couldn't find the index for this book anywhere. But this book is part of a 5-part series on kinship. It has essays from many indigenous culture voices. It has essays from biologists and scientists looking to find a way forward on this planet. And so far, I'm only in book 1. There are 5. I'm very excited about that. The most striking essay, when I first started reading, I was like, what is this nonsense? And then the more I read it, the more I really cannot stop thinking about it. It is an essay that advocates against settling on and extracting minerals from the moon. And it's a thought exercise. And one of the things that they say in this essay is it's an extension of like very hopeful, deep future work where they're protecting the moon for generations very, very far into the future. And that's an incredibly hopeful view of humanity. So I want to kind of ask us, all as a group, what would happen from our goals if we stopped, or like from our games, if we stopped having goals in them? If we stopped saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, the player will do this. And goals are not the aim. And I would encourage everybody in this room to go for interesting behavior. And when you're watching players play your prototypes, look what they do that you haven't seen before. and find ways to reward that. So why would that work? Well, it turns out in robotics, that works brilliantly. If you have two robots, one you're trying to teach to get to the door, and the other one that you just tell, okay, you can do something different every time you go through this maze, but you can't do the same thing twice. Guess which robot gets through the door faster? It's the one that explores the interesting novel paths along the way. That actually builds up, because one of those paths is going to be walk through the door, right? And if you're slowly having to explore the world through novelty and building on complex behaviors, you're looking at having a curiosity mindset. So this is a really interesting book by Stanley and Lehman called Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned. It came out a few years ago. There's a really cool essay on Medium, and I'm going to tweet all my notes after my talk so you can just nab them. I'm at Phoenix Perry on Twitter. But Roman Levinoff has a really amazing Medium post where he breaks out the science of robotics that's come out since then and looks at the ways that while novelty might be one way, what could be another thing? And one of the things that he looks at is negative constraints. And I was like, that's really fascinating. So it's like the idea of what you cannot do. So maybe we could create and design negative constraints into our world, and that could help us build more interesting systems. So could negative objectives exist in the form of limitations? What are the limits of what a player can do? And how can we allow for complexity to happen within the exploration of behavior? Now, all of us who played our way through the pandemic really discovered the value of adult play. Looking for play reawakens something in our culture. During the pandemic, you could not buy rollerblades, roller skates, synthesizers, paints, pens. Everything was selling out all the time, right? And it's because people suddenly had time to discover, right? And play is very important to us. This was generated by Game Box 1970, and I just love the way it came out because the pieces in here to me feel so exactly like something I want to play with. Like, who are these two? What's their story? So during moments of trauma, play is a survival mechanism, and that's the prompt for this image. So when we're experiencing trauma, play is our way out naturally as human beings. It's how we escape the oppression of our everyday lives. We look for new ways to flex and push at our world during then. AKA, we start looking for novelty. We start looking for growth. And the pandemic was a really liminal space for us where people were between. They were between jobs, they were between their families and being alone, they were between life and death in many cases, and this sense of isolation and community. And it was one of the only places where we were still allowed, was outside, right? So many of us got into outdoor hobbies. That's how I found skating. I could go outside and see other people, even though I couldn't get within 6 feet of them. And it turns out when you're skating, you do not want to be within 6 feet of someone. It's probably a collision and a broken bone if you body check someone. No one wants that. Well, for a bad skater. For a good skater, you can survive that thing. But you don't want to hit somebody going at full velocity. So everybody kind of naturally was distancing. And I found skating. I think some people found swimming. I think some people found basketball. And just being outdoors and allowing us to kind of reform our communities based on areas of interest versus on areas of capitalism. So now I want to talk about this new emerging idea that happened during the pandemic in HCI research. And it's been moving, and you've seen it in the other talks, this idea of entanglement. And entanglement is coming out of materiality. It's coming out of a lot of research into how our minds, it's coming from anthropology, it's coming from sociology, it's coming from feminism. And it's this idea that's born from how everything, like these flowers and the stand and this mic and what I'm doing here right now is impacting how I'm able to think and what's able to happen as a result. So with our technology, we're entangled with it now. We don't memorize as we once did as a culture, right? We know how to search. We know how to find. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember when that mindset shifted. Around 26 or 27, I lost the ability to remember huge chunks of information, but I got really good at finding things. And that is an example of an entanglement with search engines. So entangled with our technology via wires is what I got out of this. Body's entangled with technology. And it looks a lot like trees, and I couldn't help to think about how our technology is our nature and how our nature is our technology. Some of the earliest technology was us interacting with nature, for example, stone napping. And there's a lot of neuroscience now that shows that not neuroscience, anthropology and archaeology that actually proves that our brains shifted in the way they were able to work around then, because it changed how we were able to consciously understand the world, the idea of carving in stone. So I think there's a lot of therapy and a lot of healing and a lot of movement through play. So this is my local skate park. I've been up and down this park hundreds of times. I have a relationship with this park that's deeply connected to me. And I was at the park a couple of weeks ago, and I started thinking about this tree over here on the side. And I started thinking to myself, how is this tree supporting the skaters here? What's its relationship? And I just couldn't help but think of all the people it had shaded and it had been there for. And its curves, to me, started to feel like the curves of the park, the way the branches are curving over the park. And it's because the park isn't a road, right? You know? And you see on the other side where's the street, and they're growing like this. And I just found that really beautiful. Something about that felt like deep in this tree, it knew the form of the geometry that it was next to. And it was growing with it. So how do we critically reflect on our place as designers and creators in our culture? What's our entanglement with what we make and how we put it out in the world? How does what we make change us, and how does it change other people, right? How are we entangled with the natural world around us? And how do we create systems of care in our games versus systems of competition and fighting? So I'll tell you a little story. It's kind of a funny story. I learned that Scandinavians will never actually dislike you, but they'll give you the shittiest look in the human history if you do something they don't like. They'll never come out and say anything to you, but they'll scowl. They've got the scowl down. So I was sitting at the cafe here, and my partner and I we're notorious bird lovers, so we started feeding the jackdaws like straight away. This one, he carries peanuts in his bag, like he's ready to go to feed a crow at any moment. And we saw these jackdaws, and he immediately is like, oh, you know, and he brings out the peanuts, and we're sitting there eating lunch, and I slowly start feeding the jackdaws, and I can tell the people around me are getting angrier and angrier, and eventually this jackdaw is eating off my plate. You know, and I'm feeding it, it's taking food out of my hand, and I'm having just the best time. This jackdaw's hilarious, right? I've got a group of jackdaws, but there's one that's more precocious than all the others. And I was like, well, you know, and eventually he takes my sandwich. He just takes the sandwich and leaves. And I'm like, more power to you, should have seen that coming. But it was really an amazing moment. That was the first meal I had here, and the very first interaction I have is this like little interaction with this jackdaw, and I was like, what do these guys dream of? So this is what the GAN generated when they asked, what do jackdaws dream of? So I want us to ask as creators, what we make, are we creating trauma or are we healing? We need to really watch out for perpetuating intergenerational cycles of trauma, right? Who here has had family that has been soldiers? Who here has had a family, a grandparent or whatever, that's been touched by a war, right? That stuff comes down through us. We hear those stories, and their fear and their way of looking at the world invests in us. So when we go and play shooter games, we're just re-traumatizing ourselves. What are we doing? So this settler colonialism death grip grind on our culture is generating trauma, and we need to find a serious way to reform this. And I think that there are ways to think about hunting games that are very different than the way that we're creating shooters right now. You know, the way that if you hunt in an indigenous culture, you have permission essentially from the animal to kill it. Like there's this relationship there. There's an entangled relationship with nature that we've lost. And these kind of fighting simulation games, good God, we have enough of that out there. We need to think about how we create games that actually build hope. So you're responsible for the world you create. And I have to ask, would you want to live in it? Would you want to live in the world of your games? Is that a space you want to occupy? So how can our games open these new spaces of play, care, and wonder? And do we even need a traditional game loop? Is that even something we need to still be doing? It's a question. So I want you all to consider how traditional game loops are encouraging flow and how flow is replicating colonial structures of power. And from there, I want to ask how we can decolonize play. This is a game by Irene Tokini-Fubara-Manuel. And the game is alt controller of her Nigerian passport. And she made a game of what it feels like for her to try and come into the UK border and how her body becomes subjugated by entering this state and entering this system. This is a really powerful game. I recommend all of you look her up. I think she's one of the strongest voices on decolonizing play of her generation. She's a millennial. She's a very young academic. She's just getting started, and I'm so excited to see what she does. But watching this game and watching her make it with this idea that even walking through a space that had been systemized in this way was creating this experience for her. And the fact that she chose to make a game out of it, to me, really reflected the meta level there of how space in games is colonized. She talks a lot about this in her own work. So I want to ask yourself, have you all ask yourselves, how are you replicating these systems that oppress through play? So let's talk about some games that worked during the pandemic and some games that didn't. I don't think Nintendo ever expected Animal Crossing to be what it was, right? Nobody expected that. And it got appropriated. Who here went to a gallery exhibition in Animal Crossing during the pandemic? I did. Who here taught a class in Animal Crossing? Right? You know, all these things that you could do were happening in Animal Crossing. And one of the most powerful things to me that I saw was Adele Lynn staged a Black Lives Matter protest in Animal Crossing because she couldn't actually go out to protest. And I was like, this is amazing, and I love it, and I'm so here for this. And there were all these characters in Animal Crossing that were, you know, just standing in objection to the events of the world around them and the death of George Floyd. So this next image is a little bit triggering. I asked the GAN to generate a body at play, and this is what it made. And the fact it pulled this out of a Google image search actually really kind of frightened me. So if anybody's triggered by body horror, close your eyes, and I'll tell you when you can reopen them, or take a second and leave the room, and I'll give you a second. Okay, so close your eyes if you're traumatized by this stuff. So this is what the GAN gave me out of a body at play. I was hoping to see an image of someone playing. I got this. And it showed me, I started thinking about the ways our bodies keep score, how our bodies hold trauma inside of them, and how therapy through moving and through motion play and through these alt control games, I think the ostrich game, you know, I'm running in, that's going to help undo some of that trauma. Now, it is a competing game, but the fact it was made of a Swiffer, I just got to tell y'all. Chef's kiss. So at every possible moment, our bodies are recording and reflecting on the choices we make, and they're holding them in, right? And these experiences we have and these worlds we create, we're storing that information in our physical selves. And I found this out the most profound way possible when I started really spending a lot of time doing yoga. And that happened over 20 years ago, but I still do it every day. And I moved through the joints in my body, and I discovered different traumas in each one. I thought I'd have it out, and it would show up somewhere else. It was moving around, and eventually ended up my hips. And I was holding onto it so tight that one day I actually kicked a hole in the wall of the yoga studio. I was that angry. I had never had such a flash of rage. I paid for the wall, but I was full of rage, just physical rage of wanting to just scream and kick. And there was nothing going on in the room. Come on, let's get real. My life was fine. Everything was okay. But we hold the trauma of our experiences in our body. And that every trauma that is our intergenerational trauma, our cultural trauma, just being outside, reading the news, all that gets invested into our physical selves and balled up. So every possible moment we're kind of awake that this is happening, and I'm asked, how can we resist these spaces through play? So another thing I did during the pandemic was draw weird wacko worlds that made me very happy. So I have notebook after notebook full of these. These are just some that were on my phone. They're not even the best ones, but they just made me really delightful. They made me very happy making them. And I was sort of realizing that as I was able to be there, I could spend time out in nature, and that it was critical to my mental health. So I'd go outside, and I'd see the plants, and I'd see the sun, and all of a sudden I was a human being again. So are we creators of games, or are we creators of hobbies? And I actually want you guys to think about how profound a hobby is. A hobby is something people return to over and over and over and over and over again throughout their lives. How can we make hobbies? How can we make things that people obsess on and love for years? And I think some games do hit this, But I'm really curious how we can make hobbies. So now I'm going to tell you some things I learned from getting really enmeshed in my local skate community and going out every day on my wheels. And I should be on roller skates right now, but I came in too late, so you're just going to have to miss it. And these things really made me reflect back on my life. So this is a thing that I did for my skate community 2 weeks ago. I led a glitter and glow session where I helped a bunch of skaters trick out their boots, and I also helped a bunch of children paint their skates. And I was able to give my ability to make art to all these little kids who have all these skates, and all of a sudden they're just going crazy, right? Next time I'm going to bring some masking tape because it's a little too wild. But it was amazing to see these kids just dump glitter and dump color on their boots. And, you can see these pair right down in here. This kid went nuts. It was fantastic. This is, Hillary and Michelle, and they're hanging out, being wonderful. I forget the tall guy's name. He's an amazing skater, but I forget his name. And the group I'm part of is the Burgess Park Skate Group. We have about 1,000 members, and we skate together outside all the time. And we do these street skates. So for me, during the pandemic, London turned into a roller rink, and it still is. Every week now, we go out twice and skate miles all over the city together. And this idea of moving in a group together with people through an urban environment changed my relationship to the city. And there's a lot of really interesting research on ludic architecture and how skaters, and particularly roller skaters, skateboarders, they don't experience the rhythm of a city the same way as other people. They experience the rhythm of play. And I would encourage everyone here to go out and look at the city as something that you can play with, that's malleable, that you can do different things than what are prescribed architects decided you could do. I can tell you right now, those ramps outside just look like giant jumping obstacles to me. So it's my little community. We're at _BPS group on Insta if you want to follow us or you're interested. And it's just pretty much the best group in the world. So now I am going to tell you a list of things that I learned skating that I think have something to do with play and that might be something, things we could take away into our experience. So It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It matters how you face it and how you treat those around you. How you treat other people is way more important than what you do. You are your limitations, but your limitations are real. You're going to fall. It's not the falling that matters, it's how you fall and how you get back up. You can step up to your comfort zone piece by piece, look over the edge, get comfortable, but sometimes you need to stop thinking so much and just do. There's no try, only do. Overthinking a trick will end you. Spot your landing. Where are you going? Look where you want to be. Not where you're at, where you want to be. Where your eyes go, your body will follow. If you do not respect yourself, you will break bones. Judging your progress against others will hurt you. Go into a run thinking, what can I learn from this? Not what can I accomplish or how good is this going to look on Instagram. What can I learn from what I'm about to experience? Learn through trying something new each time you practice. Look for what is interesting. Focus on the interesting each time you show up. Your community is your sanity. Showing up for others is showing up for yourself. Try new things, but get really comfortable with something first. Don't try something out of the blue like a crazy person. Go very slow up to it, but still don't be afraid of trying the new thing. Turning up, Okay. Listen to folks who have more experience than you, but always find your own way. Turning up every day is a thing you should do. I should say thing, but breaks and rests are really super important. Your tribe will not be found through capitalism, but only through shared experience and shared values. You can learn everything about someone on how generous they are with their knowledge. Only spend time with other people who share. People who capitalize every impulse in their lives are sharks. If you doubt yourself, you will fall. Breathing is everything. Watching the sun comes up drastically improves your mental health. Healing from trauma can happen through movement, and we don't need to drag our traumas out for each other like luggage. No one needs to carry that baggage, not even you. It's okay. Go out there, get wild, dare to dream of a sustainable future full of plants and play. So, a sustainable future. This is what we get. Much better. Let's use what we know to build a future full of dreams, where play is part of everyday life, and giving and care is how we proceed, and we resist the simple explanations for how to make wonder. Because just maybe, and this is the prompt for this next image, everything is going to be all right. Okay, that's it for this bit. Where are we at? I'm at time, basically. How much long have I got? 15 minutes left? Something like that? So if you want to pop out now and you're done, pop out. No pause out. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so now I'm going to show some of my own work. Thank you for hanging around. I'll show you some of my own games. And if there's time left, I'll talk about my own research. Sound cool? Okay, let's do that. Cool. All right, I'm going to drop straight down to this. So I'm going to plug something real quick. So here's me just plugging, unabashed. I just made a machine learning plugin for Unity and Unreal that includes movement tracking. So you can include motion and gesture and dance in all your games. It's called InteractML. You can go nab it now on the Epic Store. Unity version is on GitHub. It's a little, my postdocs are working on it. It's a little weird. They update changes all the time, look through the branches, no promises. No, it's student software. The Unreal version is like a rock. Cool. All right, let's talk about my weird games. Okay, the last big hit game I had was Bop Party. This was nominated for a GDC award. And I'll show you the very first version. I'll show you some other versions. I think I have sound. We'll find out. Does my laptop have sound? No sound? Okay, well, these boxes make sound. So, and then when you connect between people, different tones and sounds happen. And eventually, we gamified this into a really fun rhythm game, where you had to touch different people at different points in time. I let over 3,000 people touch me in 1 year. It's a lot. It was right before the pandemic. I'm patient zero. And I learned a lot about the human need for touch during this period. But you can play my game in huge, giant circles. All the boxes are aware of which box they are, so it's not just like connecting two things together. They know whether they're being rotated. They know who's got them. And there's this rhythm game, and you can form giant circles. And it's really ridiculous. I think this is a video, and you'll see the boxes light up that have to be connected, and you'll see that people are making chains between those boxes. Right? So this is my ridiculous game. Here's a little bit more. I've seen people play Bop Party with flirting, which is always interesting. Full three-way going on there. I've seen people play it with kissing, which is another thing. Both children and adults, which is always really fun. It works with pretty much any touch through the body. And here you'll see some really cute players, and you get a sense of my boxes. There are different levels. There's an open world level that allows for complete free exploration with the sounds in the boxes. So you can create all kinds of different tones and sounds by moving with different gestures. So like if you move like this, you get a very different sound than if you move like this. So, ooh, hi, I'm sorry. Cool. So this is the game that I did right before the pandemic, literally the month before pandemic, and I'm convinced I gave way too many people COVID during this, so I apologize to the world if we just didn't know it was coming. But I worked with a ton of artists, Federico Fasce, Robin Baumgarten, Adele Lynn, Ben Kelly, Matthew Jarvis, all my students. We all made this together. All my graduate students at the CCI, some of their names you'll see up here in a second. And we made a giant low-poly video game forest that we built in the real world. And Ben had been working with the Wampi, which is an indigenous community in Brazil, and he had been working to record the sounds of their local environment while the environment is being actually they're in the Amazon. Let me rephrase that memory. But their community is being clear-cut. So they're losing the sounds of the nature in their actual environment. So Ben Kelly's been going down there and making sound recordings, and he's built a giant sound library for the British Library now. So we're keeping a record of this landscape, which is being lost. And he's been working with the community to advocate for political change within the community. And the game had all of these sounds embedded in it, so you could explore the soundscapes of a forest in a city. People invented games in this. People stayed for hours. I had no idea until I actually was in it how the sounds of the forest will actually unlock a piece of your brain. It's crazy. It just unlocks a piece of your brain, and you never want to leave. You just want to hear it forever. And there's some part of our mammalian brain up in there that is built to respond to these soundscapes. And you can kind of see people laid on the floor for a really long time. All of the interaction points had different sounds. I put cushions everywhere so the kids could stack them, throw them, roll on them, have an absolute ridiculous thing. And they all invented different games with the cushions every night, which made me really happy because the cushions were they were kind of something I was like, oh, people might want to sit on the floor, but they became the interaction cycle. Like, they liked that way more than my technology interaction cycle. They just wanted to stack up the cushions and invent games like the floor is lava, or how high can I dive off the cushions? So we're getting as many as they could and diving into the installation, and I'm so glad I beta tested for monster behavior because it needed it. They saw the dome as a giant jungle gym, so there was some fun there. And I worked with my students to kind of put this together, and we all had such a good time. And, you know, this is Anna. She was like, can we do a forest bath, like a sound bath? The idea of a sound bath was actually her idea. And that, you know, I hooked up with Ben. But you can see all of us here building it and collaborating together. And I think it's really important that when you teach, you also make. And I make with my students. We always build big projects together. And I learn, they learn. It's an experience for everybody. Sometimes it fails, but I love that. And I like working on a big thing together. It gives me a lot of hope in humanity. This Shell song, he's talking about it, but you can kind of see it here. And it's just this big, beautiful light-up room. So here's some pretty pictures. So this is the installation if you're pulled really far back. It was 13 meters by 9 meters, so it was really big. You kind of get a sense of it. Cool. I also made a game with Heather Kelly about bees. So I was trying to get people to communicate with haptic information to each other. So if you've got a big haptic floor and it's vibrating, can you get people to follow patterns? Can you get people to communicate with each other using touch? And I'm really inspired by the waggle dance. So we had people wearing sunglasses in some of them so they'd see less. But this is one of the prototypes. And you can feel people trying to find the bee on the floor. So they're trying to find the vibrating bee. They can hear it, but they're not sure where it's at. And it led them to these different goals in the end. And they had to pick which goal it was. And if they succeeded, the box would light up in order. And you can see here it's got like that's what happens if all of the pollen's been found. So that's kind of where I'm at and what I've been working on. And I'm right at time, and I'm aware that you guys have had a lot of long talks. So that's my work. I'm Phoenix Perry. You can talk to me. Bye.
Let's hope she's coming back. Okay, mic drop moment, I guess.
You weren't prepared for that.
Phoenix, are you here for questions? Or?
I have the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we're doing questions? I've got to take questions?
If you want to.
All right, let's do it. What up?
Cool.
What y'all have?
Thank you so much for your talk.
What's your question? I'm not
Josephine, what's your question?
Come on over.
Here's your microphone.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey.
Thank you for that. That was so refreshing and wonderful. I really enjoyed it. I'm good. I'm tired. It was a late night and I slept really badly. But I just loved hearing about your skating. I was a skater. I used to skate in London all the time. And I had these boots that you could turn into skates. So they're like, you put
Hold this. Hold my beer.
Got it? Okay, the lights are on me and I'm sitting on the stage. This is all good. I love this. Oh, our skates. Okay, I'm going to nerd out. I'm a skater and I'm going to nerd with skates. Is that what's going to happen right now?
That's what's going to happen.
Fuck, yes.
That's why I said hold my beer.
Ah!
I just got to get them out. Yeah, hold my beer. Keep talking.
Oh my God, they're beautiful. Yes, exactly. Oh my God. Okay, so I was poor in London, and I was an undergraduate, and then I was a master's student. This is how I got around London with no money, all the time. Yeah. And one of the most amazing things about this was how it changed the space for me. Like, one of the things in London that happens is that it evacuates at a certain time, and especially like the financial district. And so I used to live near it, not at it, because I was poor. And the best places to skate at night is to go into the financial district. It's completely empty, and you can use that space in the most amazing way. And your talk made me want to think about space and the way you talk about space. There you go, it lights up. Oh, shit. I wanted to ask you about space, imagining new spaces and queering spaces through play.
I think queering spaces through play, we both know that roller skaters, there's a ton of us that are in the queer spectrum.
Yeah.
Right? And that the queer community has a really strong place. The queer community has a really strong place. That thing's so on my face, kind of awkward. My lipstick's all over it. But the queer community had a really strong place in skating, and I think there's a reason for that. It's because it's kind of a liminal activity. We're not asking for permission, we're taking it. And I love that. I love transgressive play. Get all up in that. How many laws can you ask your players to break? How much responsibility do you have for what happens next? So anyway, that's a thought. I'm all about it. I agree. I think this is a way to queer space.
Yeah.
Next question.
Someone else? There's lots of people. Check it out. Show you what up. There you go. Behind you back.
Straight. I got this again. I'm going to hook this awkward thing back on my face. So
hello.
awkward.
I really love the concept of using, I guess, these sort of proprietary controllers, but
Yep.
something I've always run into an issue with is how do you bridge the gap between players who can get a hold of these types of devices and actually give them to the communities that want to use them without, dealing with the money aspect of things.
I feel like the makerspace community has been all over that, but our world is full of technology, and the best hackers you're going to find are in Africa, particularly in parts of Africa where there are trash dumps and trash reclaiming, because your life is full of technology you're going to throw out, and you can make games with toaster. There are all these chips in absolutely everything. You don't need to go buy an Arduino kit. That's a bad plan. You can just open a lamp and look what's in there and open up the things in your house and cause trouble. I'm a big fan of reclaiming old technology. My partner actually grew up really without much in the way of financial, his parents were weird hippies. So he knows how to take apart technology. It's just sort of what he does. And he's taught me a lot about that. My friend Janet does a lot of stuff with a group called Restart about repairing technology, and there's just so much tech. Now when I open a piece, now that I've got a bit of a background in engineering, and I open up any piece of tech, I just go, wow, free capacitors, free resistors, free integrated circuits. What does this one do? Let's type its number into Google. So I would just encourage you to go to a trash dump. I used to make my students go to the local thrift store or go to the university had a trash reclaim, and people would just put stuff in the garbage. It was totally full of electronics. I just go, you make a project with the trash. You don't need to spend money to make art. There's an amazing alt control game out there with the Swiffer. Next.
Hi. Oh God, this is loud. Okay. I don't like hearing my voice. I just noticed that. Sorry. I'm not going to make sense because I just saw shiny skates and I'm just very distracted right now. Anyways, I was going to talk about how you talked about recreating trauma through play.
Yes.
And I think I have an objection to that because I'm really fascinated with the way I understand the normalization of military complex through games and how it can be harmful and be normalized. But I'm also very fascinated with the way how, for example, Gothic literature makes us face the things we dread.
Exactly.
And how play, especially with the things we are repulsed by or the things we fear, can be very interesting. And this is, I think, for example, I'm fascinated with the dysfunctional relationships in fiction, for example. Would never want to be one, but it's very fascinating to see how two people can make each other worse, It's fun.
I would encourage you to look at all the skating stuff I did, which is healing and through play, right? It's healing trauma through play. What I'm for is, games like Gone Home, where we look at our trauma and we question our trauma and we learn from our trauma and we grow from it, right? What I'm against are, games, while they're fun, but how many, U.S. military industrial complex Halo rifles do we need to see? Like, it's a really insidious relationship when the U.S. military takes weapons from this stuff and puts it in actual warfare, which they do, right? That's actual, literal, living generational trauma right there. So I think that, yes, I agree with you. I'm not going to disagree. I agree completely.
Hi. First of all, thank you for this talk. This was amazing, and this really made me think about transgressive play generally. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big I feel like I acquired a new love for these. I always like these, and I was kind of wondering maybe.
I'm gonna come over here so I can see you.
And I was kind of wondering, because I've loved things like, for example, Trackmania track making, the ways they've created trick modes or Counter-Strike surfing,
yes.
things like that.
Yes.
And I was wondering maybe so I guess two things, maybe what's your favorite example of transgressive game modes in other games, and also maybe how would you what do you think encourages people to do transgressive play in games like Counter-Strike, for example?
Ooh, transgressive play in games like Counter-Strike.
Do you know what Counter-Strike surfing is?
Yes.
Yes.
I think first of all, I think you need to set an expectation of what's expected, right? What do you expect out of people? I don't want to die on a light. So what do you expect out of people, right? And then you tell them kind of why that's not going to work for them, right? And then you can maybe create reward cycles. So I'm thinking of Cam Over. Do any of you here know Cam Over? It was a game that was played in Montreal where he incentivized spray painting over surveillance cameras. And you got points for going over surveillance cameras. And you started collecting rewards for that, so rewarding the system. But every time I play Cam Over with my students, I just send them outside first, and I go, count the number of surveillance cameras around this campus. And they're literally in one block over 25. And I ask them, why do they surveil students so heavily? Why are you being watched with 25 cameras from the London police? And I think when you show people how they're being controlled or held back by the system that's been designed, they have an intrinsic motivation to go and violate the rules.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
What type of music is recommended when skating?
Oh my God, so many types of music. Where do I start? What kind of skating am I doing?
Tricks.
I'm doing tricks. Where am I doing them?
Skate park.
Oh my God, bring on the heavy. Give me the heaviest, thrashiest, goth metal you can find. Give me health meets death metal and I'm there. I really love just heavy music when I'm skating in the skate park. I feel very differently when I'm jam skating out on the street or when I'm just kind of flow skating on a trail. But if I'm pushing myself on a skate park, what is coming out of my ears is total doom and destruction.
Any recommended artists?
Oh my God, I'm a huge, okay, so, oh God, there's so many. It depends though, sometimes I shift. Right now I'm really into Sons of Kemet, which, is not a death metal band at all, but they've got this song called Hustle, which I cannot listen to it enough. My last video actually has that song in it. It's the lyrics are it's this song about being born from the mud and not having enough, but you're going to make something with nothing. That's one of the lyrics, and it's this song of being a hustler, going out there and making the world around you. I've been playing that in a skate park recently, and it's more of a hard hip hop would be the way I'd put it, African rhythms, hip hop. It's very, and I'm really into that at skate park right now. It gives me so much and the video, I want to play the Sons of Kemet video for you all almost. It's just, watch Hustle, Sons of Kemet. It's one of the best music videos I've ever seen. Yep.
Right. A bit of a, I don't know, an ending question. So first off, the presentation was really good, but how much and where did you get those roller skates? I've done derby before. They look expensive.
They are.
How much?
Way too much. So
Okay, are we talking triple digits, 4 digits, 5 digits?
They're not that. Oh God, how rich do you think I am? Okay, so
I don't know. People spend a lot of money on things they're passionate about.
all right. Okay, so the Vans are custom made, so I had to pay. There's $70 for Vans normally, so I paid the 30 pounds extra to get them customized in my favorite colors. The next thing I did is really tricky. So the plate is from a French company called Flaniers. But recently, like last year, they announced they were bringing out this nylon version of it. This sold for 100 pounds to the first people who bought it. I was one. The plate, the boot, the wheels, the bearings, garbage. So what I did is they said that the plate system was going to be compatible with the Flaniers skate, which is a premium skate. So I ripped all the hardware off, and I looked at where the holes were, and I was like, what plate, what roller skating plate? And I am the nerd of my community. I mount the skates for pretty much my whole crew. I've mounted tons of plates. I've never mounted an Eris. I really want to mount an Eris right now. But I looked at the holes and I thought, I think a Pilot Falcon's going to fit on this. So I bought a Falcon plate. It was, I bought it in dollars, so it was $200, so that brought it down to like 160 pounds, something like that. And then I just attached it to the nylon base, and the wheels are just kind of neon. They're like $60, they're not so much. And the toe stop was another, I think 15. So add that all up, probably 3, somewhere in 3. Realistic money. Nowhere near as expensive as my synthesizer collection once was. And the cool thing about it is it comes with a key. I'm not a giant ad for Slays, I swear to God, I promise. But it comes with a key, and you can just pop the bottom off. So you guys have seen me wearing these shoes around all week, right? They're just normal shoes. So they have a key. You just stick it in the back, and you just take the skate off, and you're just a normal person again. I hope that answers that. Next.
That's it. Then I have a question. No? Did you guys have a question?
I can't hear you. So.
Okay. Then I have one last question. Maybe
Okay.
if I get too close with that. Thank you for your talk. There's especially in the start where you're rejecting colonialist Western perspective and for very good reasons, both capitalism and communism. You go on talking about things that are connected to gifting, basically rejecting Homo economicus and all these sort of bullshit
Indigenous
constructs,
economies.
right?
Yeah, indigenous economies.
That it's sort of interesting to watch somebody go as like, yeah, everything that you have learned so far in school, as in all the epistemologies and sort of frames of thought that you were sort of educated in school, throw them in the trash and go skating.
Yep.
And I love that, right? And it's absolutely, like, again, just connecting this back a little bit to yesterday and the radical levels of radicality in at least our faculty versus our students, and the fact that we as faculty, I guess, we found a space where we can say that, because I can throw that stuff in the trash and still eat and live in a place, and my kids go in kindergarten, and that's not necessarily the same for everybody else. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what are the trajectories of your students after having been exposed to this kind of thinking and making? Where do they end up? Where are the niches to keep doing this kind of thing, and how true can they stay to their vision?
I have a couple of students that I'll give you examples of both. How about that? So one is Carolyn Sanders. She was a student of mine at NYU, and now she spends her life fighting online abuse and trying to educate people about trauma online. She's worked for everybody from Twitter to Facebook, down, trying to go in and talk to them and advise, here's how you make your platform safer. Some of her features have been rolled out, some haven't. So she's always proposing ways that companies can make online spaces safer. She's going in and talking to people at Discord, that kind of thing, right? So that's one trajectory, like thinking like, here's the world as it is. How can I help make it a little bit better?
Pragmatism.
Then I have another student who I think is really cool, but I think this was a really powerful thing, and I'll explain why. So up until now, I'm afraid, this is a company, a technology company that you all know that was in China, was only hiring Western designers. And it's because Silicon Valley has a death grip on innovation, right? And who is allowed to design, who can control the visual narrative of our world. And I had a student who was Chinese, who was an amazing designer. And he's like, I can't get hired in China. And I'm like, God, if you went to Silicon Valley, they would just, you wouldn't actually be able to land the plane before he'd have 20 offers. Beautiful, conceptual, everything about him was great. He went back and he got a job as a designer at said technology company. And even though that doesn't look like a really radical move, him being there and resisting that colonialism is a really radical step. So I think that you can still work in our world and take radical steps without being poor, you know? You can go and work inside Google and try and convince them to create a more compassionate technology and revise their privacy policies. You can go work at Apple and help them think about how they need to think about interaction. You know, there are these things you can do. You don't have to just check the whole world. In fact, we do live in a really realistic world, and you do have to make these choices. And I haven't been an academic my whole career. I worked in industry. I made games. I need to eat, you know? And you have to negotiate with the devil that be, but you can dream of a better world. And if we're making creations and worlds that people are spending time in, we can propose alternatives, right? Maybe eventually we'll slowly get there.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you so much.